Good evening, Who Dat Nation, and a special Wednesday night hello to our Bayou Blitz family. Welcome to week one of your Bayou Blitz podcast, week one of the regular season. Anyway, I'm one of your co-hosts, Bob Rose. Joining me is the other co-host, Brendan Boylan. Brendan, I don't know off the top of my head how many years we've been doing this now. Media together. I know this is our second Bayou Blitz regular season solely together. And it feels good. It feels strong. I don't feel like you and I have nearly as many question marks as our New Orleans Saints do on the field, but we'll have plenty of time to talk about that. How are you tonight?
I'm good. I think working together, if it wasn't through this kind of, platform going all the way back to like the radio days.
Yep. Crescent City Connection, I do believe, with Kyle T. Mosley.
That's 2016, I think.
Yep.
So quick math. I mean, this is probably like our 8th year working together.
Wow.
In some capacity, maybe not directly, but some capacity. Obviously, directly since 2019, the first year of Sports Illustrated that we were together. So we have a little bit of a history. I'd like to think that the rapport that we have with each other is seen, through your viewing devices, and that we like each other. We have hung out a few times and have tested that theory supposedly.
Yes.
And we like to keep it cool and laid back for the most part. Unfortunately, to start the show today, not as fun and laid back. And that's just because of what everybody saw in the news today at Appalachia High School in Winder, Georgia. You guys might be saying, well, why are you guys talking about it? Like, my news has already been talking about it all day. Well, first off, it is a tragedy. I saw the last report was 2 students and 2 teachers had lost their lives with everything going on down there. But it hits a little bit closer to home for me personally, maybe not directly, but Appalachia was a high school that we played in football almost on a yearly basis. They're about 20, 25, 30, maybe 40 minutes, somewhere in that range, depending on back roads and traffic, from where I went to high school, where both my siblings graduated from high school as well, where my father coached volleyball and soccer for a handful of years. Like, my dad coached games at Appalachia. So it does hit a little bit closer to home. It's so sad. I mean, I don't want to be the person that says, like, thoughts and prayers. I mean, obviously, yes, my thoughts are with those families and the people that are in that area. But to stand on my soapbox for just like half a minute is, when I was in high school, which isn't that long ago, my 10-year anniversary was this year. When I was in high school, we didn't worry about things like this for the most part. This was not something that happened on a yearly basis. It didn't happen on a decade basis, really. Maybe one insulated incident here or there, but now we're talking about this isn't something that happens yearly. This is something that happens daily. This is something that happens weekly, somewhere in the United States. And for the leaders of these communities, your Congress people, right, and all the way up the chain to the person who's sitting in the White House, like, if you guys really care and your thoughts and prayers are really with these families, like, how about we do something about it to prevent it from continuing to happen? Do I have that answer? Absolutely not. I'm just a guy who talks about football for a living, or half a living, maybe a quarter of a living. I don't have the answers, right? But you would think the people that we elect into power do. And I just hope at some point I don't have to hop on a podcast like this. I don't have to open up Twitter or X during the middle of the day and just say, like, holy bleep, like, that's down the street from where my parents live. That's down the street from where my nephew is, right? Something's got to change. And until it does, we're going to continue to have these tragedies. So let's stop this cycle of thoughts and prayers, not think about it, not do anything until it happens again. Let's have thoughts and prayers. Let's change something to make sure that the young people in America are going to be safe for years to come, whether it's people my age, whether it's people that are my nephew's ages, whether that's people that are Bob's kids' ages. We have to keep our community safe for those people. And that's all I really wanted to open up the show with. Like my thoughts are with people in the Winder community tonight. I know a lot of people in the Winder community. Like I open up my personal Facebook, which you guys know I don't like to give out. I like to keep that like close. And I see people that are like, I hear sirens like from my house, or one person offering their front yard for parents to park their cars and walk to the school because they didn't know where their kids were. Like, I don't want to have to like open up an app and see that again. And my thoughts are really with those people because it's heartbreaking. It really is.
And you know that last part you mentioned about people living close to the school, offering up their front yards, for people to park to go get their kids. That's the kind of thing that would help prevent tragedies like this. I didn't take from what you said a moment ago about preventative kind of things, get preventative measures. I didn't, unlike some political gurus, I didn't take that to mean that you're pro-gun or anti-gun or anything like that, or any kind of political agenda. But it's the community. You can prevent tragedies like that by being stronger as a community, by being nicer as a community. Bad guys are still going to be bad guys. It doesn't matter what kind of gun control you have, what kind of political leaders you have, what kind of police you have. The bad guys are always going to be the bad guys. But it gives them less opportunity to hurt others when you do have an open and friendly community. When you do teach your kids the differences between right and wrong, and good and evil, at home. If teachers and counselors and coaches, and community leaders, if they recognize, okay, this person or this individual, they show some signs of depression or any other kind of potentially negative or harmful behavior, either to themselves or others. Then be a little bit more proactive in stepping in. And listen, we could go hours and hours and hours, talking about potential solutions like this. But in a nutshell, I believe that measures like this, people getting more involved, just people opening their hearts and their lives to others in their community. We talk about you guys, the Bayou Blitz family, all the time. If more communities had that kind of idealism, had that kind of approach to general life, and especially to each other. And I know it's corny. Why can't everybody get along? I'm if nothing else, I'm a realist, and I know that that's never going to happen. But if you do your part, and you're friendly and open and compassionate to your neighbors, to your fellow human beings, then maybe that's going to have the effect on the next person, and maybe that's going to have an effect on the next person, so on and so forth. And with that, I'll get off my soapbox.
Yeah, I mean, I say it when we close out every week, right? Like peace, love, and positivity. Like, let's just continue to spread that. And like Bob said, everybody could just be a little bit nicer to each other, right? It's that's really the key to everything. But with that, let's talk about football.
Yes, please.
Let's please talk about football. The Saints open up week 1 against the Carolina Panthers in the Caesars Superdome. I had to catch myself. I almost wanted to say Mercedes-Benz. I think I will forever want to say Mercedes-Benz, but within the Caesars Superdome. Bob, you kind of alluded to it there at the open. This is a team that still has a handful of questions, right? I was asked last night on a Panthers podcast, essentially for years, the Saints have been an offensive team. Is it fair to say the Saints are now a better defensive team? And I said, well, yes, because the offense showed nothing last year. And if you look at the offensive line, I don't know if you're really going to have an offense at all. There's so many question marks there. So I guess that's where I want to start the show. And I think it's fair to start the show there. I think it's fair to be and continuing to have these conversations. But you're starting a rookie at left tackle in week 1. You're starting a guy at right tackle that has 7 career starts in Trevor Penning, and say what you will. And some of you I know in the comments are probably going to say what you think of Trevor Penning at this point. You have, if you want to call it, 2 veterans and Eric McCoy at center, and then Cesar Ruiz, if you really want to call him a veteran, at guard. And then you have the other guard position where you're just sitting there like, ooh. And you remember those conversations Bob and I were having throughout the offseason about the Saints bringing back Andrus Peat and how that might be a very underrated thing? Like this is why we were saying, like, say what you will of a guy who was a multi-time Pro Bowler who looked pretty good last year, when he had to step up and be the guy. Yeah, it would have been really valuable to bring him back, because now you're looking and you're just going, I don't know. And again, I think I said it last night on that podcast, was that you go back just 5 years and you could argue the Saints had one of the best, if not the best, offensive line in football. And now you could make the case they have one of the worst offensive lines
easily
in football. So starting with that, Bob, this is a Panthers team that, at least on the outside, you're looking at a guy like Jadeveon Clowney for them, who's going to be playing in Carolina for the first time since he was a member of the South Carolina Gamecocks. But you have a couple shuffling pieces and moving parts for the Panthers. And that's the case for a lot of the Panthers roster. And as a shock to no one, when you have the worst record in football, a lot of your roster turns over the next year. That's the case for the Panthers. Where do you see the strengths of the Panthers defense being, and where could they really take advantage against the Saints?
I think that's a great question. Where do I see the strength of the Panthers defense? Because I poked fun at them pretty openly all offseason, that I liked what they did on the offensive side of the ball. They made a concentrated effort to surround their young quarterback with a better supporting cast. But in doing so, they let a lot of their good younger defensive players, stars, walk out the door. Brian Burns gone, Frankie Lavu gone, Dante Jackson gone, Jeremy Chin gone, Von Bell gone. And for the most part, they didn't do the replacements that they got for those players, at least on paper, our favorite saying here, are significant downgrades. So I look at the Panthers defense, and first, I think it's a unit that's going to take a while to come together, because they lost all those key contributors on the offense, and free agency and through trades. But I think ultimately their front seven looks like it's still going to be a physical unit. Now, A'Shawn Robinson, he is no Brian Burns for sure. But we've watched a lot of A'Shawn Robinson over the years. You and I have. He's a big physical defender. He is going to eat up blockers. He is good against the run. We know Derek Brown, the defensive tackle, looked like he finally had a breakthrough season. Last year. Then I've never been a fan of Jadeveon Clowney, but he's a decent pass rusher when he decides he wants to play. And the Panthers also brought in DJ Wanham, who I was always a big fan of, from Minnesota. So instead of telling you where I think the strengths of the Panthers defense are, I think that I'll just stick to, given where we think the Saints' weaknesses are, or at the very least their biggest questions heading into week 1, their offensive line and offensive tackles in particular. I think that Jadeveon Clowney and DJ Wanham could create a lot of havoc for that New Orleans Saints offensive line on the edge. And if the Saints have to respond by double teaming both edges, then you have Derek Brown and Ashawn Robinson in the middle. And neither guy has put up, neither Brown or Robinson has put up big pass rush numbers through their career. But we know that they're capable, and we know that they're very good run defenders. We also know that the Saints want to and frankly need to establish the run, to establish a balanced offense. So if you can't run the ball, you are looking at a similar scenario to what you had last year. And I said this on Under the Dome with Alan Ulrich last night. Derek Carr, I don't care. I'm going to ignore you Derek Carr haters for a moment. Even the most ardent supporters of Derek Carr will have to concede that you cannot consistently win with Derek Carr at quarterback when he drops back 35, 40 times a game. So that's not what the Saints want to do. The Carolina Panthers front seven is a real concern to me.
Glad you mentioned running the football, because there's some question marks with that too. When it comes to New Orleans Saints, obviously Jamal Williams coming off of his worst year as a professional. Alvin Kamara has had an interesting offseason in participating and not participating in things, contract negotiations, putting his house in New Orleans up for sale, and then saying that he's not going to be open to discussing contract again until the end of the season, which, in everybody's opinion on that's different. But hey, once the season starts, the season starts. Like, I totally get it. Like, let's not have your brain fogged and clouded with unnecessary things. Like, you're getting paid this year regardless, and you're under contract this year,
right.
Regardless. But there's been a lot of questions about how much does Alvin Kamara have left in the tank as an NFL running back at his peak level of NFL running back. Kendre Miller out, with injury for at least 5 weeks. So Kamara and Williams have an interesting opportunity here. I think more so. Well, I want to say more so for Kamara, but I actually would counter argument with myself that Williams has just as much to prove. It's an opportunity for them to not truly split touches, because it's not going to be like the Ingram Kamara years where it's almost like down the middle. It is definitely going to lean heavy Kamara's way, but it's going to give Jamal Williams the opportunity to show that this coaching staff that, hey, that guy that you did give a 3-year contract to, I can still play and I can still be a complimentary guy. And right. You don't need to give my touches over to the second-year guy. And for Kamara, it's an opportunity to be like, hey, let's get this contract stuff worked out, because clearly you guys need me. But running the football in this type of scheme, a zone scheme that kind of fits Kamara's skill set a little bit better, maybe you do see him get back to those levels where he was in the Offensive Player of the Year discussions, where he was, in the end zone double-digit times a year. And with that, I want to give you guys one of my picks of the week for Prize Picks, FanDuel, your sports book or casino of choice. I was waiting for the flashing light. If those lights behind us, if I can get those to flash and have music and everything, you hit a jackpot, that would have been cool. But
yeah, we need it, because I already got a coin phrase for it. Brendan and Bob's betting bonanza.
Perfect. Certain someone's smiling down on us right now. But no, I think for me, Alvin Kamara is actually a pretty good bet this week. So here are the two that I like for Alvin Kamara. I'll give you guys a couple for the Panthers as well. But the two that I like for Alvin Kamara is, one, the over receiving yards. Depending on your sportsbook of choice, I have seen his over-under be about 30. So I've seen 29.5 and I've seen 31.5. I'm hammering the over on that. I just feel like, and we talked about this a lot last year, if he doesn't get the ball early, he becomes disinterested. The last thing you want to do as a new offensive coordinator is have your star running back, maybe one of the most versatile, if not the most versatile piece of your offense, get disinterested. They're going to get him the ball. And you might say, well, they could just hand him the ball off. Yes, but look how creative the Niners were last year with Christian McCaffrey.
Right.
And I could see a lot of that with Alvin Kamara. Maybe not the same volume, because McCaffrey's volume was ridiculous. And also, if you're a fantasy football owner of McCaffrey, I'd be a little worried this year. I know he was the consensus #1 pick, but you have a guy with injury history that has stayed healthy for the last 2 years and has a lot of miles on him.
Yep.
So just keep that in mind if you have McCaffrey on your roster. But I do like Kamara for the over. With that as well, kind of goes hand in hand with what I just said, in keeping your star running back happy in a new system. This is a guy who has not seen the end zone a whole lot the last 2 years. I believe the last time that I looked, Kamara anytime touchdown score was like plus 110, right? Not super phenomenal odds, right? Like, you're not going to have a retirement party off of that bet if it hits, but enough to make it interesting to throw together in a parlay with some other things. Or if you're a Prize Picks person or an app like that where you're hitting the over, the under on multiple different things to cash, like, I would definitely consider throwing Kamara anytime touchdown score in there as well. A guy who, again, hasn't found the end zone a whole lot, was on pace to just shatter the Saints record books for touchdowns. And I know he is now the all-time touchdown leader, but this is still a guy who is not that far off from 100 career touchdowns. And at least in the back of my mind, if I'm Alvin Kamara, I definitely want to hit that number. It doesn't all have to come at once, but every touchdown counts. So I could definitely see Kubiak rewarding Kamara in a new offense after maybe a long drive or something. So I like those. Those are my two, picks of the week when it comes to the New Orleans Saints. I was a little baffled that receiving yards number was as low as it was.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would be too, until you look at last year's Kamara receiving numbers. He had a lot of catches, not a lot of yards. He was an afterthought. He's been an afterthought in the passing game, for a while now, which is just equal parts baffling and infuriating. But again, you look at the matchup on the field. Frankie Lavu is no longer a Panther, and that was the most athletic linebacker that Carolina had. Really, one of the few linebackers that could consistently keep up with Alvin in space the last few years. And his replacement, Josie Jewell, came over from Denver. Jewell's a heady linebacker, an Iowa, University of Iowa defender. So he's a hard-nosed guy, but he's in the space, in the tackle box guy. The last thing I want, if I'm the Panthers defensive coordinating coaching staff, is to see Josie Jewell try to track down Alvin Kamara in space. Shaq Thompson, once a converted safety, so we know he was once a great athlete. He's lost a step because of various injuries over the years. So again, you look at the matchup on paper, and if I'm Clint Kubiak, I'm licking my chops to get Alvin outside these tackles, get him in space, get him involved as a receiver early on, because as you and I have pointed out several times, obviously ignored by Pete Carmichael, and before that, Sean Payton. It's not only getting Alvin Kamara involved early, it's getting Alvin involved early with what he does best, and that is getting him in space. You run 41 up the teeth of the defense when they know it's coming for the first few plays of the game, or 10 out of his first 12 touches of the game. That's not following coaching 101 or coaching football coaching for dummies. Someone needed to buy Pete Carmichael a copy of one of those books the last 2 years, because it's very simple. You get the ball to your best players in positions, in situations where they can perform best. And that's not something that Pete Carmichael has done. He's gone. I'm sick of bashing him because enough has been said. I am very much looking forward to how Clint Kubiak uses not only Alvin Kamara, but the other skill position weapons that this team has on offense.
Absolutely. I want to get to some of our questions in the chats. while we have some time. This going back a little bit ago to our conversation about Andrus Peat. Rose City asks, was it more about Pete wanting a change of scenery and wanting to be closer to home more than it was money? I think it was. I think ultimately, and this dates back to even before Pete got, thrusted into the starting lineup at guard last year. I think it was kind of known to everybody that a change of scenery would probably be best. But then it became a little awkward because then the Saints were like, wait a minute, we need you more than you need us. And Pete just said, bye. And that was that. And he went to a team close to where he's from and the Raiders, and that's great for him. The only thing that gets a little confusing to people is like, you went from New Orleans to Vegas. Like it's not a lateral move. Like you're going to a worse football team, but closer to home, still gets paid, gets to be a starter. At this point in your career, you've been to a multi-time Pro Bowler. Like, I get it.
Well, you look at it this way too. Let's make a personal comparison here. Say you just recently broke up with your girlfriend, and you're a big dance coming up, big social event, whatever age group you want to put, big social event coming up. And your girlfriend and you are still having a great relationship, lines of communication open, and you think that she's going to ask you to this event, and you're like, okay, we could patch things up, we can get back together. And then you came to find out that she ultimately did ask you to come to the event after she asked like 3 or 4 different people first, was turned down, and then you were basically the fallback option. Nothing like that was ever said by Andrus Peat. There were no sour words by Mr. Peat going out of the building, before he signed his contract with Vegas. But ultimately, that's exactly what he was. He was a fallback option for the Saints. The Saints, signed a bunch of linemen, visited with others, were unable to reach contract agreements with some of the big money guards that came off of the free agent market. 2 of them landing in Carolina, by the way. And then all of a sudden they circle back to Andrus after the draft. Hey, Andrus, we'd be interested in having you back. At that point, I don't blame Pete. He basically did say, no, thank you. I'm going to sign with the Raiders. And that's what happened.
Good comparison. Derek says, we just restructured Juwan Johnson's contract. Do you think it's so that we can sign a free agent or maybe pay Alvin Kamara? I think the Kamara conversation is completely out the window. Like, as soon as Alvin said that I'm not talking about it, the leverage is kind of gone for New Orleans to be like, hey, let's sit down and get this done, because Alvin could just be like, nah, I'm good. Like, we got to wait to the end of the season. Is it completely gone?
No.
Maybe not. But is it like 90, 95% going to get pushed to the end of the year? In my opinion, yes. I think it is more looking that route. Or maybe they have the nice little, hey, my agent's going to talk with you guys. We can come to a handshake deal in principle, and we can smooth everything out in the offseason, perhaps. But you wouldn't be restructuring contract to open up money to make that happen. So,
no, if you're going to
answer your question,
if and when you redo Alvin's deal, it's going to be, it's not going to really affect your salary cap much this year. Because again, as Brendan pointed out, Alvin is already under contract this year. You are negotiating for, renegotiating the last year of his deal next year, and then presumably adding probably at least 2 years onto that. So the restructure of Juwan's contract, it opens up potential space if they see a free agent that they like.
So there you go. And I think it is to open up some money and keep the options open at, in my mind, there's a couple positions. Safety, there's a whole lot of safeties left on the market. Offensive line, if it just absolutely goes south. And then I'm still holding out hope for a potential receiver, because there's a lot of question marks there for the New Orleans Saints as well, and we'll kind of dive into that. And I think it's a good segue into that too while we stick on the offensive side of the ball. We talked about the offensive line. We talked about the running backs. There's no need to talk about the quarterbacks. We know it's going to be Derek Carr. But receiver. Didn't really see a lot of Shaheed because of injury in the preseason. Olave, we know what the expectation is for Chris at this point. After that, you could go, well, yeah, A.T. Perry was second in the NFL in preseason receiving yards? Cool. First. He had his moments. Bub Means had some moments, also had some moments. And when I say moments like that, really just like that weird end, was it an end around play where he ran into Trevor Penning?
Yeah.
But there's a lot of question marks at wide receiver. And, frankly, I don't know many receivers out on the open market right now. But there's some concern there. I think it's even more concerning when there's already concerns at receiver and you keep a receiver that did not play at all in the preseason. Tells me that nobody really stepped up. Bob, your thoughts on the wide receiver position?
Yeah, I agree with that. And don't get me wrong, Mason Tipton was turning a lot of heads early in camp. But to your point, the Saints kept him on the initial active roster. And we say initial active roster. That active roster has been the roster for a week. They kept Mason Tipton despite the fact that he did not play a single down of preseason football. Partly because they didn't want to throw Tipton to the waiver wire in hopes of getting him back to the practice squad, because maybe they don't get him back. And that's a gamble that they obviously did not want to take. But obviously, just as obviously, Equinemius St. Brown, Kevin Austin, Samson Nakua, et cetera, none of them were able to outplay what Mason Tipton showed in those first 2 weeks of camp, despite plenty of opportunities to do so. So, yeah, I don't, health aside, I don't have any performance anxiety with Chris Olave or Rashid Shaheed. I am still confident in that A.T. Perry can kind of plateau out his inconsistencies and take command of that third receiver spot. But outside of that, Cedric Wilson has got to show me more than he has. Bub Means has got to show me more than he has. And, Mason Tipton has got to show us why the Saints kept him. So, yeah, there's concern here. Having said that, though, I like the matchup against Carolina's secondary. This Sunday. I'm a big fan. You and I are both big fans of J.C. Horn. But that young man really hasn't hit his stride yet because of injury problems. And, we talked about the Carolina dealing away Dante Jackson this offseason. They signed Dane Jackson from the Buffalo Bills, but Dane's on injured reserve. Because of that injury, you're looking at a nickelback, Troy Hill, playing probably more snaps in the base alignments, and almost a desperation trade for former Seattle Seahawks cornerback Michael Jackson, who in reality is a third or fourth corner at best, will probably be the number 2 corner for the Panthers on Sunday. Assuming Shaheed's foot is healthy, and we're hearing that it is. I think him and Olave are going to have a chance to make a lot of big plays against Carolina on Sunday.
I do too. And you've already mentioned that this is a Panthers linebacking corpse that does not look anything like it did. Not just last year, even a few years ago. It's been a handful of years since Kuechly retired. Frankie Lavu, that was one that surprised me that they weren't able to retain and keep around because he was one of their brightest spots a season ago.
Yeah.
Shaq Thompson never lived up to that hype after Kuechly's retirement. This is not that athletic, linebacking corpse either. So I do think there's opportunities, not just for the receivers, but the tight ends. We've already mentioned Alvin Kamara. Throw Taysom Hill in the mix, because what is Taysom Hill? He's listed at tight end, but you and I have already said we expect kind of that Kyle Juszczyk type of look that we saw with the Niners, that to be the Taysom Hill role. And congrats to Taysom Hill on being named a team captain.
Yeah.
Very well deserved, I believe. Very liked individual. not a guy that I see, or what I have seen of Taysom Hill being the very vocal guy, but the lead by example guy.
Well, you want to read between the lines on something here too. Team captains usually get a lot of reps. In the last few years, we're kind of used to seeing Taysom Hill, depending on the course of the game and the momentum of the game. Taysom has been known to get as little as 10 or 12 or 15 offensive snaps. An offensive captain, if he's healthy, they're going to get a hell of a lot more than 10 or 15 offensive snaps. So I was kind of reading underneath of the tea leaves on that one.
Well, maybe, hear me out. Maybe he's the special teams captain. Maybe he's a second special teams captain. You know, he's a hell of a punt. What do they call him? Oh man, why can't I think? Punt protector. There we go.
He is. I mean, he's a punt protector. We've seen him block punts. He's been on the punt coverage team. I believe early in his career, I know he returned kickoffs. I believe he's returned a couple punts too. So
he could be a special teams offensive defensive head coach captain. What is that? What is that meme? Who is it?
I saw you slip in head coach there.
Yeah.
For the dentist, for the DA haters.
You're welcome.
Like it.
That was actually, oh man, I can't even think of who the comedian was, but there was a little skit and he just sat there. He was like, whatever his like position, running back, he was like running back, fullback, quarterback, tight end, wide receiver, offensive line, defensive line, head coach, assistant coach, general manager. I don't remember who did that one, but John Hendricks. I was with John. He was in Charlotte one Sunday, and there was rumors that Taysom was going to have to play like a major role, and he like tweeted that out. We're sitting at dinner, and John's phone's just like, bzz, 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 bzz. I'm like, what's going on? It was, oh, that's got like 700 retweets, and I was like, oh, cool. I wish I had 700 people that even looked at my tweets.
Right.
Let's flip it to the defensive side of the ball now. What should be the Saints' strong suit? Bryce Young. I felt bad for last year.
Yeah.
His offensive line was like watching middle schoolers play like D1 college athletes. Like, it was bad for Bryce last year. But with that said, Bryce had some moments against the Saints last year where he was able to scramble and pick up some key first downs in some of those matchups, which leads me to some of the picks that I like for the Panthers this week. And one in particular that really caught my eye. And again, guys, when I give you these picks, I'm not making you an overnight millionaire. I'm not reading into my crystal ball. I'm not putting together a 27-leg parlay for you guys. I'm just saying, hey, this might be a good one to hit. Again, depending on your sports book and what is your sports book of preferred choice, Bryce Young's over-under for rushing yards is 9.5. 9.5. Spank that over, guys. My goodness. You guys know, and you loyal Saints fans know, for whatever reason, Saints defense sees a quarterback that has even an ounce of mobility, and they forget how to contain a quarterback. Like, Bryce Young's going to scramble once or twice and pick up 10 yards. Fair to say? I think so. Smash that over. But Bryce Young does have a little bit of a revamped offensive line. We've alluded to that a little bit. Offensive weapons might be a stretch, but they did bring in some new faces. And some guys that could maybe help them in the receiving corps. I still think this is going to be an offense that struggles, especially against the Saints defense that I think really has aspirations of being a top 10 and maybe even a top 5 defense in the league. A very strong front seven, maybe the best secondary in football outside of strong safety, because we don't know who's going to play strong safety. It's going to be Jordan Howden, but he hasn't really stepped up and taken the bull by the horns. But Bob, when you see this matchup on paper, why is the momentum going to swing New Orleans' way?
Because I just think New Orleans, and you just pointed out, New Orleans is the vastly superior unit when you compare defense versus offense on that side of the ball. Uh, you could tell what the Panthers are doing, and again, they made a concerted effort to surround Bryce Young with a better supporting cast. They drafted Xavier Legette in the first round. They traded for Deontay Johnson. They drafted running back Jonathan Brooks in the second round, not going to play this week. They drafted tight end Jatavian Sanders, the athletic tight end from Texas. And then most notably, they went out and spent a ton of free agent money for the two top guards on the market, Damian Lewis and Robert Hunt. Now, I think that that's significant because as we know, covering the Saints, as fans of the Saints, Sean Payton realized that with Drew Brees' height or lack thereof, that it was more important to beef up, to fortify your guard, your interior blockers rather than your tackles. I know that goes against all conventional football wisdom, but Sean Payton and Drew Brees thought, focused on giving Drew line of sight from the pocket. Well, Bryce Young, probably shorter than Drew Brees. I have met Drew in person. I have not met Bryce in person, so I can't attest to that. But at very least, he's listed at 6 foot generously, Bryce is. So, again, you recognize this. You're talking about a quarterback that went down, was sacked 65 times last year. It's no wonder that young man didn't get killed. So you go out and sign the two best guards. And on the flip side, you're talking about a New Orleans defense that had the 4th fewest sacks in the National Football League. So the Saints went out. They got Chase Young. They expect bigger things, better things from Brian Bresee. Chase had an extremely disruptive training camp preseason. You went out and signed Willie Gay. You talk about wanting a player that's going to chase down and contain mobile quarterbacks. Willie Gay is that dude. So I think the key matchup here is how the Saints defensive front performs against the Carolina offensive line. Because even though you have Deontay Johnson, even though you have Xavier Legette, and Saints killer Adam Thielen is still on the roster, I have a hard time seeing any of them having a big day against the Marshawn Lattimores, the Paulson Adibos, the Alontae Taylors, the Tyrann Matthews. The only way I see big plays out of the Carolina Panthers passing game, like momentum turning plays, is if you can't get to Bryce, and Bryce has time to sit back there in the pocket and make plays with his arm or go through his progressions while evading pressure. So that's why I think that's the key matchup is getting pressure on Bryce Young, shutting down Miles Sanders, Chuba Hubbard, and that Carolina passing game. Because if you're able to at least force Bryce to go through his progressions faster, make him uncomfortable, I don't think there's any receiver on this Panthers roster that's going to stand out against that Saints secondary, who I think is elite.
I will say this about Xavier Legette. A guy that some people thought was a reach, by the Panthers and where they got him. But I will say this. If you've heard the man talk, he has one of the most unique, distinct, and almost funny type of dialect I've ever heard. It is very southern, backwoods, like good old boy country, South Carolina. And he just always seems so damn happy. Like all the time. It doesn't matter whether it's a practice interview. They interviewed him on the sideline at South Carolina. Ashley Shamady did last week during the college football season. I think like the TikTok, admin for the Panthers had him do like a weather report at some point during the training camp season. He's so happy all the time. Really hard to root against type of a guy. So even though he's a Carolina Panther and he's in the division, I hope he has a long, prosperous NFL career. But I'm with you. Like I just don't see this offense. We say on paper, we say in Madden a lot on this show, but I look at this offense on paper and I go, there's nothing about this offense that excites me. No. Right? There's nothing that jumps off the page at me that goes, wow, like that's a difference maker right there. And I think Bryce Young can be. Mm-hmm. But it's really hard when I watch Bryce Young on his butt for most of last season. Like, I don't even think we got a full season of, well, what could Bryce Young be? Because he spent half of it on the ground.
Bryce Young could be roadkill if he goes through a season like that again.
Exactly. Like, the fact that the man didn't get hurt and didn't really miss any games is astonishing in itself. The amount of times to take the sack numbers away. I don't even know what the quarterback pressure numbers were. I don't know what the quarterback hit numbers were. But for a guy who's like listed at 5'11", I think, maybe he got 6 foot. But like I realistically think this guy's like 5'10". Like he's a small individual. So with that, the Saints, Carl Granderson has a little bit to prove after getting that contract extension. Cameron Jordan has to prove not to the organization, not to himself, but to the fan base that he's still got something left in the tank.
To himself, Cam is as Cam is as competitive as they come, and I think Cam is angry at himself for his numbers last season, and I think Cam's going to have a big year. I do. Not 12, 15 sacks. I think that Cam Jordan, he's not that Cam Jordan anymore, but he is the Cam Jordan that's going to create a lot of big plays for his teammates and create a lot of disruption by himself at various points this season.
You know what I think would be how Cameron Jordan at this stage of his career would fit perfectly with this team? Is the Cameron Jordan that everybody raved about as a run stopper, as a run defender. If we could get him on the high side of that and contribute 5-6 sacks a year with Carl Granderson there, Chase Young there, we're going to see some young on young crime potentially this weekend. I think that would fit very well into the mold of what the Saints defense wants to be. It still gives them some opportunity to get after the quarterback, still gets some opportunities to raise that, all-time sack number. But really let those younger guys just kind of cut loose and go wild at the quarterback with Granderson and then Chase Young, who's playing for a contract. So with that, I don't see this being a high-scoring game. I really don't. I see DJ just threw in the chat, Saints 4 interceptions. Part of that means that the Panthers would have to throw the football, and I don't think that's part of the game plan to have Bryce throw the ball a whole lot. Even if they get down big, that's just not the MO or the model of Bryce Young as an effective NFL quarterback. Even if he lives up to everything he's supposed to live up to, if Bryce Young is throwing 40-something passes a game, something's gone wrong, right? And that goes back to my conversations, almost 2 years, a year and a half, 2 years ago, when I was saying with a chest full of confidence that Stroud was far and away the best quarterback in the draft. Like it wasn't even close. And that's just because of arm talent. Like if CJ Stroud was in Carolina last year, it would have been bad because he would have had no time. He would have spent half the year on his butt. And if, and same thing, if Bryce Young was in Houston last year, maybe he has just as good of a year. He doesn't have the arm talent that Stroud does. And because of that, I don't see him ever being a guy that's like, hey, go win us a football game. I don't see that. Derek says, I'm hoping everything starts to click for Trevor. I'm assuming Penning. But if not, how long of a leash do you think DA gives him before he goes with someone else? The problem with that is I think the leash would be short if there was anybody else behind him.
Right.
The leash is super long because there's nobody behind him.
No, and there's nobody on the free agent market. And I know you Saints social media that are stuck in Madden world. Oh, just trade for someone. Who's going to trade you an offensive lineman of top quality? Yeah, they would have to have their heads examined. So if not Trevor Penning, do you have confidence in Landon Young? Do you have confidence in Oli Udoh? I don't. Not heads and shoulders above Penning anyway. So, as far as the least that you give Trevor Penning, like you said, Brendan, you almost have no choice, but to go with him. I mean, if he's that bad, obviously you're going to turn to Udoh or Young or do some kind of shuffling. But don't be surprised if we see a max protect over on that side. If they keep Foster Moreau over there, if they run Tamm Hill in motion as an extra move blocker over there, especially on play action rollouts, you can bring Tamm Hill from left to right. Have him chip on the edge rusher, and then trail Carr as he rolls out of the pocket to the right side. I think we're going to see a lot of that this season, from Taysom and Juwan Johnson, perhaps even a running back too. Clint Kubiak's going to if Trevor Penning does not play well, Clint Kubiak's going to have to get real creative, and we know he's a creative mind anyway, but you don't want to challenge that to red line level right out of the gate.
Absolutely. And I also don't think this is a game where you see the full bag of tricks either.
No.
That's why I also said it's going to be low scoring. Like, some Saints fans are going to come out and be like, well, they should blow them out. And it's like, well, I mean, yeah, if you're looking at the team in Madden or on paper, yeah, like the Saints offense should put up some points and the defense should do its job. This is week 1 with a new coordinator, whole new offense from an offense that I don't want to say needs to be brainwashed, because there's not a whole lot of guys who have been here super long. I mean, I guess Alvin Kamara is probably the oldest in the system.
Yeah.
So, but there's a lot of guys that have been with Carmichael all these years, and you have to unlearn all of it. And now learn something else. And then we talked about this with Derek Carr, like 4th consecutive year with a new offensive coordinator. Like, that's hard. I don't care who you are. And I think I made a comparison to Baker Mayfield the last time we talked about that. Like, Mayfield had the same struggles and then finally found some success when he went back to a coordinator he had once had. So I don't know. We'll see. With that, third time we're bringing up bets today, because I think it's going to be a low-scoring game. The over-under is 41.5. I'm taking the under. And you guys might be going, whoa, Brendan, like you tell me both teams aren't going to score 20 points. Like, I totally see this being like a 21-10 type of ball game. Like, I don't see this being maybe, you could go up to 28-10 and still be under the 41.5. Like, I could see it be somewhere in there. But I don't see the Saints getting to 30, and I don't see the Panthers getting more than 2 touchdowns at max, at least from the offensive side. So I would take the under on the 41.5. The Saints are 4-point favorites. I like the Saints covering the spread.
Yeah.
T Dirty says no excuses this year from anyone, not even the water boy. I'm a little disappointed because I have a Bobby Boucher signed Adam Sandler in my house, but it's not in my office because I would be bringing that out right now. I was like, no, like we could still play Bobby Boucher. I've met Adam Sandler, as nice of a guy as you think he'd be. Just gonna throw that out there. Adam Sandler's a super cool dude. But no, I mean, I'm with you on that whole, like, there shouldn't be excuses from anybody. Like, this is a Saints team that should compete for the division. Like, I'm in total agreement for those things. But I do think there has to be a little bit of a leash because it's a new offensive system, right? Because there are some moving parts here. I'm not saying it's got to be a really long leash, but I'm saying if the Saints offense only puts up 21 points week 1, we can't be like booing Derek Carr week 2. Unless it's really, I mean, it is the Saints fan base, but there's got to be a little bit of an understanding that it's going to take some time. It cannot take as much time as it did last year.
No.
But give it give it 2 or 3 weeks before we're chicken littling this, you know?
Yeah, and listen, there has to be a learning curve, guys. Let's be realistic here, with the offense, because it is an entirely new system, an entirely new we keep saying system. It's an entirely new philosophy. There's going to be more motion. There's going to be more formations. Different players are going to have their usage expanded. We believe. Alvin Kamara, Rashid Shaheed, Tamm Hill, Jawan Johnson, just to name a few off the top of my head. I think we're going to see them all do more things in this offense, but it's going to take time. It's going to the offensive line. You can bash on Penning, Ruiz, one of my favorite whipping boys. You can bash on them all you want. But the reality is this: yes, they have to play better as individuals, but we're still talking about a unit that has 3 new starters. That's always trouble early on for an offensive line, because they have to get their own communication level established. They have to get their own cohesion set. That takes time. And you can tinker around, at least we believe on paper, you can tinker around with some different things against the Panthers team that I believe is going to be improved this year, but still nowhere near a playoff contender, because right after that, you got the Cowboys, the Eagles, the Falcons, who I think are grotesquely overrated, but nonetheless, they're a rival. They're a team that a lot of people have most people have winning the NFC South. But you got the Cowboys, Eagles, Falcons, Chiefs, Buccaneers. That's kind of a murderer's row, where you have to tighten up that learning curve in a hurry. So do not be surprised if there are some ugly moments in week 1, because they're working out some kinks and they're trying to work them out as quickly as possible for when they get to the more competitive, we'll call it the more competitive, more worrisome part of their schedule.
I was going to say, those first 6 weeks for New Orleans are pretty gruesome. Like outside of Carolina, like you get Tampa Bay in there, and you guys might say, "Oh, it's Tampa Bay." It's like, it's still a divisional opponent. And then what you have Philly, you have Kansas City, like you have some pretty damn good football teams that you have to play early. Now the back half of the schedule very favorable. So if you can survive in comparison, Bob, let's be honest.
I know.
Favorable. So if you can get through the first few weeks of the season around 500, if you can get into week 7 at 500, I like your chances at least competing and winning the NFC South. I'm not talking anything more than that. Win the division and you're in, right? Like that's as easy as it gets. And the Saints have failed to do that for 3 straight years.
Right. Baby steps. Let's not anoint this team as Super Bowl contenders quite yet. Let's take care of one step at a time, which is securing a playoff berth, which most likely means winning your division. Because we don't expect anybody in the NFC South to come away with 11-6, 12-5 or better record or anything like that.
Exactly. I mean, this is a team division rather, that I think you're looking just like last year. Like if anybody wins 10 games, you win the division. Maybe 9. Yeah, that's how it's been lately. Maybe it's 9. I don't know. Last question here before we dot or drop and head out. I'm going to throw it in there because we haven't talked about it. We went almost an hour without talking about it, but DJ threw it in the chat.
Oh, no.
Ready? Who's quarterback 2? Because the depth chart said Hainer or Rattler. Who's quarterback 2, Bob?
My hunch is that this is going to change almost on a weekly basis. And here's why, folks. Neither Spencer Rattler or Jake Hainer have separated themselves from the other. I know a lot of you Rattler riders are saying, I'm going with Rattler riders and Hainer Hive. There's not too many in the Hainer Hive, but there's some. But you Rattler riders want to anoint him as the next Brock Purdy or the next Dak Prescott, the next gem. Hold your horses. The man had some really nice moments in training camp and preseason, but so Jake Hainer. Oh, Spencer Rattler's outplayed Hainer in the last preseason game. Yep. Hainer outplayed Rattler in the previous preseason game. And they both played pretty well in the preseason opener. Hainer, my opinion, based off of what I know and have seen, Hainer was a little bit more consistent in training camp, in the latter stages of training camp, but we're kind of splitting hairs here. So that's why Dennis Allen is challenging both of these young quarterbacks. There's no conspiracy theory. He's not burying Rattler on the depth chart to make his boy Derek Carr feel better. None of that bullshit. He's making these two young guys compete and earn the job. And until one separates himself from another, it might be a weekly announcement thing that we're waiting on. My hunch, given the fact that he has been with the team already for 1 year, my hunch is that the number 2 quarterback for Sunday's game against Carolina is going to be Jake Haener, with Spencer Rattler, the emergency quarterback. Whoever it is, guys, that's not the guy that you're depending on to win this game and win most of the games this season. So let's not blow things too much out of proportion, shall we?
I think that's the most logical answer I've heard over the last few weeks. It's going to change. And look, you guys know how I feel. I think Spencer Rattler has the potential, scariest word in sports, to be a guy who could be the starting quarterback of the New Orleans Saints one day, right? The biggest thing that Rattler did this offseason is he went from being, and I'm taking this from, let me get my source right here. I think it was Underhill who wrote this, or Duncan, someone in New Orleans football, essentially wrote along the lines of Haener went from being a 5th round pick to like an interesting storyline or something along that. That's the best thing he did for himself this offseason. To Bob's point, hasn't really separated himself from Haener though. And Haener from Rattler, even more so, Haener didn't separate himself from Rattler.
No, which frankly is a little bit more concerning. But again, right. Neither quarterback played poorly. They both actually surprised me with how well they played. But whether it doesn't matter whether you are a Haener Hiver or a Rattler rider, you can't honestly look me or yourself dead in the mirror and say, I think that this guy vastly outplayed the other, because you haven't looked at it. If you believe that, you're either delusional or you haven't looked at enough tape. That's just fact.
All right, let's jump into dot or drop. We don't need to sit here and talk about backup quarterbacks the last couple minutes.
Please, because I'm tired.
Tired of that, or just tired in general, or a little bit of both?
Yes, a lot of both.
Great, a lot of both. Gotta send you some coffee here soon. All right, dot or drop, Bob? Dot or drop? The first touchdown of the 2024 regular season will be scored by someone not named Kamara or Olave. And when I say scored, I mean like in betting terms. Like Carr could throw it, but whoever catches it in the end zone, that is your first touchdown score.
Drop. I'm going to go out on a limb here. I first of all, I do agree with what you said earlier about Alvin Kamara. I think they do get him in the end zone, make an effort to get him in the end zone. But I'm going to make a prediction here that the first touchdown of the New Orleans Saints regular 2024 season is going to be scored by the defense. So I will go drop. Yeah. But if you are talking first offensive touchdown, not being scored by a guy named Kamara or Olave, I'm still going to drop it. I think Kamara, I think those two guys are the big weapons for the Saints this year, and I think that they come out of the gate relying on each of them.
I have to pull this up before you throw dot or drop on, just for giggles, because I'm sitting here throwing out numbers all day from sports books. I have to know what the betting odds are for first touchdown of Sunday's game to be Saints defense. I have to know. I'm not going to make that bet because it's crazy.
You know what? Here's why I might make the bet. I was strong-armed into a fantasy football league this year. If you can't tell the disdain in my voice, and I let the computer pick most of my first couple rounds, first really 6 or 8 rounds, because I was busy doing other things. But as a guy, I signed in later in the draft, and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to pick up the Saints defense because I do have confidence in them. 2 picks before I was going to, someone else picked them. So this is why I now guarantee that the Saints defense will score a touchdown. Maybe not the first, but a touchdown. You're giving
the Charles Barkley guarantee, so
yeah.
I mean the opposite. So Saints defense to score the first touchdown of the game is plus 2,600. So $10 would pay you $260. And the Saints defense to score at all is plus 550. $10 would pay you $55.
Man, I got to come up with. I've got to look at my own couch cushions because I got 23 cents to my name right now. Maybe I'll try to come up with $10 between now and Sunday.
There you go. If you want to get really crazy, Adam Prentice to be the first touchdown scorer of the season. $10 would pay you $950. Just for any crazy people out there. That's not going to happen. Prentice might lose his job to Taysom Hill in the second snap of the season. All right, hit me with your. I had to look that up because. That was going out real bold, Bob. That was real bold. Saints first touchdown of the season. I think it's gonna be Alvin Kamara, but
that's fair. And yeah, like I said, I agree with that. My daughter drop. I'm gonna go straight for because we'll have plenty of time on our Sunday pregame show to talk about game related things. I'm gonna go straight for the jugular. Nice. Daughter drop. The Saints will win the NFC South this year.
Dot. I think the defense is going to be hovering around top 5. I think that in this offensive scheme, you get the best out of Alvin Kamara that you've got the last few years. And I am hopeful A.T. Perry becomes that number 3 receiver that the Saints need. And that the offensive line does enough. Doesn't have to be good. Just has to do enough.
Be average, and I think that they'll be all right.
Isn't that something we gotta get on a t-shirt? I think I put it in my notes. It's like be average or something like that. Don't suck. It was like something like that. I thought I had it in my notes, but I guess I don't. But yeah, it was like something like that. It was like don't don't suck. Oh man, I have to look for that because I'm positive I threw it in here somewhere. But anyway, all right. Dot or drop. Okay. Dot or drop. Derek Carr throws for over 4,000 yards and over 20, or I guess 27 or more touchdown passes.
It's an and 4,000 and 27 plus.
27 or more.
I'm going to go dot. We know Derek Carr can put up some nice passing numbers. We saw him put up some nice passing numbers last year. No, a lot of them were in. I'm not going to use the term garbage time, but come from behind mode. I think. The Kubiak system is not a pass happy system, but it is a quarterback friendly system. And I think that once they get the terminology and the comfort level down between quarterback and coach and along the offensive line, I think that this team I know that this team has the skill positions to put up a lot of prolific numbers. I think that we know that Derek Carr is a 4,000-yard passer. We know that he's a 25-ish touchdown pass a year guy. So I think he gets that with the weapons around him as long as he stays healthy. So yeah, I'm going to dot that.
For comparison purposes, last year he threw for 3,878 yards and 25 touchdowns. So very close, right?
He finishes the second half against Green Bay and against Minnesota. He has those 4,000 yards and at least 1 or 2 touchdowns, wouldn't you think?
I would think so. All right, hit me with the last one of the night.
My daughter dropped. Chase Young will have at least 10 sacks for the New Orleans Saints this season.
Ooh, at least. That's hard because I don't know how he's going to be used, right? Because they're not overly crowded, but there is a little bit of a crowd there with Granderson, Jordan, and Young.
Mm-hmm.
Do the Saints get a little sneaky there at the end and try to hurt his value on the open market and like, you know what I'm saying? Like, how sneaky do the Saints want to get with that to try to retain him? I'm going to drop it just because double-digit sacks is a difficult thing to do as a starter, as an every down guy. I don't think he's going to be the every down guy, right? I think at least at the jump, that could certainly change throughout the season, but at the jump, I think he's going to be used more primarily in passing situations or what used to be called NASCAR packages when you'd bring, 4 defensive ends to be your 4 down linemen. So I'll drop it. I think he gets close. Like, I think 8's a good number for him. I think if he were to get 8 or more sacks this year, he would have a much better market than he did this offseason. So that's where I stand on that. Bob, my friend, you have some work to do between now and Sunday. You're going to have some more articles come out. You're going to be busy with Kyle T. Mosley, John Hendricks, and the Saints News crew and getting ready for week 1. Where can everybody follow you and keep up with your work as we are just a few days away from the official start of the Saints season and just a day away from the official start of the 2024 NFL regular season?
Yeah, exciting, isn't it? And it is. It's now the time of year where the games count. For the W and the L column. So make sure you tune in to us, myself, John Hendricks, Kyle T. Mosley, and our Saints News Network page. We'll have prediction articles, analytical articles. We'll break down what happened, why it happened, and whose fault it was that it did or didn't happen. Essentially, not only after the game, but leading up to the game previews, et cetera, et cetera. You can follow all that and more on my personal page, Bob Rose, Facebook, at BobbyR2613 on Twitter. And obviously, I mentioned Saints News Network. Make sure you give our Bayou Blitz Facebook page a follow and Bayou Blitz Twitter page a follow as well.
For myself, follow me virtually everywhere at BT Boylan. Like you said, make sure you guys follow us over on Twitter at Bayou Blitz Pod. If you haven't already, go to your favorite place to find your podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcast, etc., and go ahead and give us a follow there. It is simply the Bayou Blitz Podcast. We will be doing some exclusive work throughout the season with that. And have a couple ideas. Don't want to reveal anything before it's officially official, but going to give exclusive content just to those podcast listeners throughout the 2024 season. So
we got a pregame coming up too.
Yeah, and we have our pregame show. That's going to be Sunday. You guys can catch it live. Here we'll be on at 11:30 Eastern, so 10:30 Central for you guys. You guys are just finishing up your cups of coffee at 10:30. Just kidding. I know you New Orleans fans. You guys are probably a beer or two down at 10:30 in the morning on a Sunday, week 1 of the season. So you might as well pour in a third one before you come and catch us on the Bayou Blitz. But yeah, we are excited to see you guys now for the first time in a long time. We don't have to say see you next week. We see you in a couple days. We see you on Sunday morning right here, same spot, whether you be joining us from Facebook or YouTube. We are super excited to kick off the 2024 NFL regular season. Bob, we're officially 118 episodes in, starting our second year doing pregame shows full-time together. And what did we say? Oh, man, math is not good today. 8 years, 8th season working together in some capacity. So congratulations, my friend. It's been a pleasure so far, and hopefully many, many more to come.
Right back at you. As long as I'm still walking the earth, I'd be loving to do these shows with you. I think we've had fun together. Hopefully you guys have had fun with us. I know we've had fun with you.
Absolutely. Very well said. Well, guys, until Sunday, hope you guys find some peace, spread love, practice positivity, and we'll see you Sunday for week 1 of the regular season right here on the Bayou Blitz podcast. We'll see you guys then. Good night, everybody.
Good night, all.